Imagine standing in a quiet room with your aging parent, watching them struggle to remember a detail from yesterday, or needing help with the everyday tasks that once seemed so effortless. In that moment, you may recall Carl Jung's observation that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. It's easy to think of this as merely a statement about personal growth, but it also speaks to the almost uncanny reversal that happens when we become caregivers for those who once cared for us. We often expect parents to hold the role of wise elders, guardians of security and stability. Yet as the years pass, we see them become more vulnerable, more childlike, and we find ourselves stepping into the guiding role they once occupied. There's a subtle shock in realizing that our mother or father, once so strong and protective, can now be as uncertain as a toddler finding their first steps. How do we navigate this shift without succumbing to resentment, guilt, or denial? What does it mean for our sense of identity when we are called upon to parent our own parents? Sometimes, society treats this role reversal as a practical task, making sure bills get paid, medical appointments are kept, or ensuring the house is safe for someone who can no longer fully manage on their own. But beneath those tasks, an intricate psychological exchange unfolds, one where the child in you and the child in them begin a delicate dance. If we see this only as an uncomfortable obligation, we risk missing what Jung might call the deeper invitation to individuation, a chance to integrate new aspects of ourselves and to reconcile old wounds that have remained unexamined. Could this be an opening for healing, for embodying the compassion we once craved, or for finding a new bridge between the generations? The questions abound. In giving care, are we also caring for the younger versions of ourselves that still seek validation and love? Are we discovering new expressions of empathy, or are we merely playing out old family scripts? And perhaps most powerfully, how do we stay balanced when the lines between child and parent begin to blur? In exploring this territory, we can turn to Jung's insights, which remind us that every archetype, from the child to the wise old man-woman, lives in each of us. The childlike vulnerability of our aging parents can awaken our own inner child. It can also ignite our longing for deeper belonging, acceptance, and the security we may never have fully received. But this is more than just an emotional trip down memory lane. It's a transformative opportunity to rewrite the story of parent and child, to see each other as fellow travelers in life's ever-evolving narrative. Early in life, our parents seem like giants. They wield control, set rules, and shape our worldview. In childhood, we thrive on their guidance, but we also develop unconscious assumptions about who they are. We imagine them as unbreakable pillars. Even when we grow into adulthood, part of us still references that early map. Somewhere deep inside, we preserve an image of them as strong and permanent. Yet in today's world, people are living longer than ever before, and it's no longer uncommon to spend a decade or more caring for a parent whose abilities have significantly declined. This new social context can catch us unprepared psychologically, because we cling to the misconception that our parents are somehow outside the vulnerability that life inevitably brings. We're influenced by popular assumptions that once we hit adulthood, the parent-child dynamic becomes static. We're the grown-ups, and they remain the guiding figures, occasionally dispensing wisdom and checking in. Rarely does anyone talk about how emotionally confusing it can be when you're suddenly dealing with your father who can't recall simple details, or your mother who's grown fearful of leaving the house alone. There's an unspoken belief that roles are fixed, and we should just handle it. Yet Jung's theory challenges that notion by pointing to the fluidity of archetypes in our psyche. We're not just dealing with physical aging. We're witnessing a transformation of the archetypal roles that shape our relationships. The wise elder might reveal an inner child that was masked for decades. The caretaker within you might collide with unresolved attachments or even rebellious impulses that date back to your teenage years. Jung famously wrote about the child archetype as a symbol of potential and new beginnings, often associated with creativity, wonder, and spontaneity. But it also carries vulnerabilities, yearnings for safety, love, and nurturing. When your aging parent begins to display these same vulnerabilities, it can stir the child in you. We might wrestle with frustration or guilt because, on an unconscious level, we expect them to remain the grown-up forever. These emotional layers are the very essence of Jung's invitation to explore our deeper psyche, to see that the parent-child dynamic is never static, and that life stages contain mirrors for each other. Comparing life stages might reveal uncanny parallels. The infant who needs help with every meal, the older adult who now requires assistance with nutrition and medication, the child who clings to a parent in the dark, the elder who hesitates to venture out alone. This cyclical pattern can either fill us with dread or inspire a profound compassion. At the same time, it can stir conflicts we've been carrying, regrets about the childhood we had, unresolved anger at a parent's past mistakes, or a latent sadness that we never truly bonded. These moments can be catalysts for transformation, if we understand them as opportunities to heal or integrate. Jung would propose that when confronted with an archetypal reversal, where the caretaker becomes childlike, we are offered a unique chance to confront our own shadow. The roles are fluid, and that fluidity can open or close the door to growth. In modern psychology, there's growing research on what's often called the sandwich generation, adults caring for their children as well as their aging parents. Neuroscience studies show that chronic stress from caregiving can affect our emotional regulation and even our cognitive processes. It's no small burden. Yet from a Jungian perspective, this stress isn't just a physical or emotional drain. It's a sign that archetypal energies are intensifying. The stress can become a wake-up call, nudging us to confront hidden dynamics, like guilt over not being enough, resentment that life is suddenly so constricted, or fear that we ourselves will be in this position one day. The child archetype in us might flare up in rebellion. I've just figured out my own life, and now I have to do this. We might feel an undercurrent of shame for thinking such thoughts, but in Jungian work, acknowledging these feelings is crucial. They're part of the shadow we must face and integrate. Meanwhile, the transformation process involves navigating boundaries. Many caregivers experience an identity shift. I was my mother's daughter, but now I'm her caretaker. This shift can lead to a deeper empathy if we learn to see the childlike aspects in our parents as something more than just decline. In their vulnerabilities, there may be a hidden reflection of the child they once were, the dreams they had before they had us, and their own unhealed wounds. We start to see the full arc of human life, childhood, adulthood, then a return to childlike dependency. If we approach it with awareness, we can bring compassion not only to our parents, but to the parts of ourselves that never quite felt taken care of. This transformation is layered with potential for inner conflict resolution. Perhaps you always felt overshadowed by an overbearing parent, and now you have to manage their medical appointments and living arrangements. In that scenario, the old dynamic of power might invert. If we're not careful, we might unconsciously use our newfound authority to enact old resentments. Now you have to listen to me. Conversely, we might be terrified of reversing roles and thus avoid making necessary decisions, becoming immobilized by guilt. Jung would say that this is precisely where the symbolic child within can guide us. That inner child can teach us about empathy, about the humility of needing care, and about the spontaneity that can cut through the heaviness of adult roles. Ultimately, integration means allowing all these perspectives, the caregiver, the rebellious teen, the wise adult, and the vulnerable child, to find harmony within our psyche. One of Jung's core concepts relevant here is individuation, the process by which we become more fully ourselves by acknowledging and integrating our unconscious material. In caring for an aging parent, we bump into many aspects of our unconscious that were shaped by our earliest experiences. Neuroscientific findings show that emotional memories from childhood are stored in deeper parts of the brain, such as the amygdala and hippocampus, and they can be reactivated when triggered by similar relational dynamics. This might explain why the sound of our father's voice, now quivering with age, can still evoke the same emotional responses it did when we were 5. Recognizing these triggers gives us a chance to integrate them, to rewrite the script we might have unconsciously carried for decades. Instead of feeling trapped, we can discover empathy for both the child we once were and the parent who has, in many ways, come full circle. Another Jungian concept that applies is the idea of the shadow. In family caregiving, shadow elements can manifest as irritation, resentment, or even fantasies of escape that feel taboo. The more we try to suppress these feelings, the stronger they often become. If we acknowledge them, we can use that awareness to set boundaries, communicate more openly, and discover a healthier caregiving stance. There is an element of role confusion, yes, but also a potential for clarity and growth. The child archetype can serve as a bridge to compassion, reminding us that we, too, are vulnerable. Our parents' childlike state can trigger protective instincts rather than condemnation. But first, we must face the fact that we might be harboring anger from being told what to do when we were younger. Or perhaps we're harboring sadness for never feeling sufficiently loved. By naming these shadow elements, we free ourselves from unconsciously acting them out in ways that hurt both us and our parents. The persona, another crucial Jungian concept, is the mask we wear to function in society. As caregivers, we may feel compelled to project an image of endless patience and competence, the good son, or the dutiful daughter, while neglecting our own well-being. This persona can become exhausting if we don't also give voice to the very human struggles behind the mask. It's okay to acknowledge that caring for a parent is both an act of love and a source of emotional strain. Jung's wisdom suggests that by recognizing our persona for what it is, a functional facade, we can allow our more genuine feelings to surface. This doesn't mean we lose composure, but rather that we become more authentic, more capable of genuine compassion rather than forced or resentful caretaking. When the unconscious elements of our psyche, the child, the shadow, the persona, come together, we move toward integration. That integration might manifest in simple, practical shifts. We talk to siblings about sharing the caregiving load instead of silently feeling burdened. We allow ourselves to remember that our parents, too, were once children with hopes and fears. We stop taking their frustration personally and begin to see it as part of their struggle with aging. The synergy of these steps points us toward a more soulful experience of caregiving, one that honors the complexities of human life and the cyclical nature of birth, growth, decline, and transformation. Contemporary psychologists like Dr. Pauline Boss speak of ambiguous loss, when we care for someone who is physically present but cognitively or emotionally absent in some ways. This concept ties in with Jung's ideas of the psyche's complexity, emphasizing that part of our grief might come from losing the parent we once knew, even though they're still here. Research studies in gerontology explore how adult children adapt to caring for parents with dementia or physical frailties, highlighting the importance of psychological support for the caregiver. These findings echo Jung's view that without conscious awareness of our internal processes, we risk being overwhelmed by stress or internal conflict. Modern neuroscience underscores that chronic stress elevates cortisol levels, which can lead to depression or anxiety if left unaddressed. This is not just a story of personal struggle, it's a reality that many face. The key is knowing that transformation lies in how we choose to navigate it. Insights from family therapists also reinforce the idea that unresolved issues can resurface with renewed intensity when roles shift. Dr. Robert Emmons, known for his work on gratitude, suggests that cultivating intentional thankfulness can lessen the burden of caregiving. Combining that approach with a Jungian lens, we see that gratitude is not mere positivity but an invitation to hold the paradox. We can be grateful and exhausted, compassionate and hurt, all at once. A Jungian approach to caregiving respects this complexity, urging us to see the archetypal dance beneath everyday routines. In practice, this might look like sitting down with your parent, listening not only to the day's complaints but also to the subtext, the child in them that might feel frightened or abandoned. It might also involve journaling about the child in you who still yearns for approval or is angry about the past. A neurological study at UCLA found that such reflective practices can significantly decrease emotional reactivity, allowing for a more measured response. The synergy of modern science and Jung's timeless insights confirms that inner work can have tangible effects on our well-being and the quality of our relationships. In a broader sense, this inner work reflects a universal journey. We are all children, and many of us will become caregivers. Our parents, no matter how perfect or flawed, hold part of our story. Their aging draws a circle around our beginnings, reminding us that life's narrative is not linear but cyclical. The question becomes, can we honor our parents' vulnerabilities without losing ourselves? Can we embrace our own childlike core without falling into helplessness? Can we hold space for the ancient child within the aging adult, glimpsing them with fresh eyes that understand, at last, how tender and tentative life can be? The shadow aspects might include anger at how certain childhood needs went unmet. The persona might drive us to push those feelings aside. But real integration, real transformation, means allowing all these aspects a seat at the table. It means acknowledging that the father who lectured you about responsibility might now need your guidance on the simplest things. It means caring for a mother who might have once been distant, finding compassion for the childlike terror in her eyes. This is not a simple reversal of roles. It is an archetypal dance where both individuals can learn about wholeness, empathy, and the fleeting nature of each stage of life. Recalling Jung's principle that what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate, we realize that if we ignore the emotional and psychological undercurrents of caregiving, we risk perpetuating old patterns or creating new traumas for ourselves. Conversely, by shining awareness on these undercurrents, we open the possibility of transcending the limitations of the past, allowing each encounter to become part of our individuation journey. Caregiving becomes not just an obligation but a poignant chapter in our development, a chance to step into a fuller version of ourselves, one that includes both the caretaker and the child. We can look to experts like gerontologist Dr. Kenneth Doka, who discusses the concept of disenfranchised grief, referring to losses we endure that society doesn't fully recognize. This can apply to the emotional toll of seeing a once robust parent decline. His research highlights that acknowledging these hidden losses is crucial for psychological health. Jung would agree, because acknowledging suffering is the first step toward integrating it. Scientific studies also show that social support, friends, support groups, and professional help can dramatically improve caregivers' emotional well-being. This is a reminder that while the journey inward is a solitary path in many respects, community resources and shared stories can make the load lighter and the insights deeper. Ultimately, this process holds the potential for a profound shift in perspective. As we circle back to Jung's quote about meeting ourselves in 1,000 disguises, we might realize that our aging parents' needs disguise an invitation to meet our own deeper nature. The care we offer them can become a mirror for the care we offer our wounded inner child. The frustration we experience can illuminate unhealed places that deserve compassion. Through this, we can expand our emotional range and grow closer to the essence of who we truly are. Returning to the initial perspective that caring for an aging parent is a purely logistical burden, we can now see how that viewpoint was limited. Yes, it can be overwhelming. Yes, it can feel relentless. But it also contains a transformative potential if we allow ourselves to experience the full range of emotions and archetypes at play. In this new understanding, we hold space for both the heartbreak and the growth, the old wounds and the opportunities for healing. We discover a new wellspring of empathy, both for the vulnerable adult before us and the vulnerable child within us. So let us end with a note of hope and direction. This reversal of roles, unsettling as it may be, can be a portal to deeper compassion, a reconciliation of the past, and a potent reminder of our own place in life's grand cycle. We have the opportunity to greet our parents not solely as authority figures who have fallen from the pedestal of youth, but as fellow humans on a parallel journey through time. And in doing so, we transcend the illusion that caregiving is purely about loss. Instead, we see it as a soul-level exchange, one that opens our hearts, reshapes our understanding of love, and connects us to the universal child within all of us. In the end, this recognition allows us to embrace every stage of life as part of a unified whole. May it bring us closer to the wisdom that resides beneath our daily roles, and may it grant us a more compassionate, more integrated sense of who we are and who we can still become.